you probably saw the video that we're about to play for you. And both Kevin and I are really upset with the President of the United States when he says, hey, I want to have a conversation with you, with us, about firearms. But to have a conversation, you have to have truth and honesty. As you're going to see in this video, that is sadly lacking.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the same old, right? But I guess what we're trying to do is to make that not the same old. So, Jacob, why don't you just go ahead and roll this clip, and then we'll do a little discussion afterwards.
The Second Amendment, from the day it was passed, limited the type of people who could own a gun and what type of weapon you could own. You couldn't buy a cannon. Those who say the blood of patriots, you know, and all this stuff about how we're going to have to move against the government. Well, the tree of liberty is not water with the blood of patriots. What's happened is that there never been, if you wanted to think you need to have weapons to take on the government, you need F-15s and maybe some nuclear
you go
weapons.
ahead and stop it there. So, I mean, minus all of the fumbling,
You mean because he doesn't write his own speech and he can't remember what he had for breakfast?
Yeah, basically, and then the squinting to try and read the teleprompter there. He makes a couple of claims here, and first of all, going back to being truthful, I think that we have to start making that more of a priority. When we're talking in our social circles, I can tell you something that I have done that's kind of been like uncomfortable. You have circles of friends, they're all not going to have the same political beliefs, but when they say something that you know is untrue, even if it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, we need to start making that a priority. And I think the first one here, I mean, is this canon comment.
Can I stop you for a second? Because I think you bring something up that's really clear for all of us. And one of that is, for at least a decade, we could argue more, we've lived in this environment that is supposed to be woke, politically correct, whatever the term of the day is, Kevin. And I think a lot of us, in those conversations with friends, I know you and I have talked about this, we're tired of it. We want to be able to call things what they really are, be polite about it. I mean, we don't want to be obtuse, but we've got to actually start standing up and calling out the wrong.
Well, yeah, it's like if you say a lie one time and you get pushback, it remains a lie. But if you say that lie 10,000 times with no pushback, that lie sort of becomes the truth. And we've seen the evolution of language like this in California legislation, specifically when it comes to the term assault weapons. We now have a ban on assault weapons. Some people might look at you and say, cool, that means that nothing is actually banned since assault weapons don't actually exist.
Right.
But what the government is saying is, hey, you see those, semi-automatic rifles that have the capacity to take more than 10 rounds in a detachable magazine, that's what we're calling your assault weapon, and that's what's being banned. So, things like this. And Jacob, can you pull up that article? We have an article here from the History Channel. So you would think that, the office of the President of our United States knows a little bit of history. And I mean, just from the start here, you can try and understand when the United States was waging war in the American Revolutionary War, they actually contracted privateers. These were private citizens who carried out contracts for the Continental Congress to obstruct the most powerful navy at the time, the British Navy, which ultimately helped win the war. So, I'm sorry, Uncle Joe, but what did those ships have in them? They had cannons. Okay, whether they were pillaged from other ships or purchased or whatever. The fact of the matter is that the American population, those who had the means to purchase cannons, they purchased cannons. Don't stand up here and tell me that we had restrictions back when the Second Amendment was written, because we didn't, and it actually helped us win the war.
Well, obviously, there's a point there that you're making quite well, but there's another point that I don't want you to, when we're talking with you to miss, and that is, as Americans, we view what happened during the Revolution, the time leading up to the writing of the Constitution as, well, this was the United States of America. And for part of it, it's true, part of it's not true. When on April 14th, 1775, when this whole thing that's now known as the Revolutionary War kicked off, guess what was not said on April 14th, 1775? Oh, it's the Americans versus the British. It was the British citizens against their British government. Hence why that quote, the tree of liberty, has to be washed in the blood of patriots from time to time, was the idea that British citizens who would become Americans realized you can never trust government. Even up to the late Ronald Reagan, who said, worst thing you could hear at your doorstep is, knock, knock, I'm here from the government, I'm here to help. Yeah. No, you're not, you're here to make things worse. And we've seen that during the last year and a half and continuing of COVID. 90% of the social malaise that we have in this country is because of politicians, the government, Uncle Joe, that was out of control and still is.
Well, and this isn't the first time. This isn't the first time that, we've heard these sorts of things. So, Jacob, actually, if you can pull up, thank you, Donald Trump, for forcing the media to make fact-checking a thing. So we have a fact check on this exact statement, and it's not from a speech that he did a week ago. It's actually from the 2020 elections. Go ahead and scroll all the way down to the bottom there, where it should say something about our ruling. So let's read this really quick. Biden said, "You weren't allowed to own a cannon during the Revolutionary War as an individual. The campaign was unable to come up with an example of a law banning private ownership of cannons, and historians of the period of that time when it existed, to the contrary, there are documentation of privateers or privately owned vessels setting sail with cannons during that time period." So what do we rate that statement? We rate it false. And this kind of goes back to the point that I'm making.
Right.
Okay, you tell a lie and you get pushback, it's still a lie. They are going to continue telling these lies until they stop getting pushback. And you know what? Like this goes back to an individualistic mindset. This isn't going to affect me, so we just let it happen. Well, the fact of the matter is that's actually a wrong statement too. This isn't affecting you right now. And I think that we're starting to see some serious national and state repercussions of things that we said 10 years ago weren't going to affect us that are now affecting us. We need to stop this. You can only do it in your own social circles. Okay, so like I said, I am talking to family and friends, and I am trying to take these lies out of our language. And you know what? There's enough of us. If everybody does that, I think we can change the narrative.
Well, I think one of the things that we got to make sure we're all remembering, silence is admission. This is taught in debate, in argumentation classes across the country. If you're silent on a point, the public assumes that's a fact. And I think that is the simplest way to put to you, the people we're talking to right now, is that you can't be silent anymore. There's no benefit in a, quote, silent majority. Those are terms that have been used by the opposition to corral us so that they could get their narrative out there, which is a false narrative. And a point I wanted to bring up is, one of the things Joe Biden and several of the members of his cabinet have talked about is every time they want to, parade out an incident as a national tragedy, for some reason when somebody is a drunk driver, kills multiple people, when college buses every year end up in accidents with whether it's a semi-driver falls asleep or was on some kind of narcotic or alcohol, those don't become national tragedies of like, oh wow, 15 people died. I mean, when I was in college, I remember when 15 people died, an entire debate team was lost because of a drunk driver. Never made national news. 4 people get killed in the south side of Chicago. It's national news and why we need national gun law control. I'm not saying that that's bad or good in any of those. When anybody loses life, it's a horrible situation. But what I am making the argument is they always want to tout the issue of the founding fathers in 1791, when they were doing the Second Amendment, Kevin. All they knew was 3 shots a minute. That's all anybody could do. And those were just soldiers. Now, granted, citizen soldiers. But you know what came about in 1718? And I want you to know this factoid. It's called the Puckle Gun. It was made in France. It was capable of firing, had an 11-round magazine, 11 rounds. And with a competent person, could fire 63 rounds in just a few minutes, which averaged like 9 rounds a minute, which was 3 times faster than the government's guns, Mr. President. 3 times faster. And who owned those? Do you remember when we were talking about that? Some of the people that owned them?
Yeah, I mean, private citizens in general, but George Washington.
Yeah, George Washington. They have one of them on display from time to time at Mount Vernon. We had Adams. You had Mason. You had Jefferson. The very people who penned the Second Amendment penned it at a time that they knew that private citizens had firearms that were more capable than the American government's military.
Well, yeah, and I mean, if he's gonna parade out these these statements like you need fighter jets and nukes to take on the government, as if to say that they would use fighter jets or nukes on their citizenry if there was an open rebellion, I find that kind of to be a little bit of a dumb statement. I mean, you use a nuke on your citizenry, then you don't get any revenue from taxes. So,
well, and I doubt they're going to, after 20 years of asymmetric warfare where they've yet to nuke anybody, they're going to nuke Americans. And I think it's highly provocative when the President of the United States accuses law-abiding citizens of trying to plot the overthrow of the government. That is just rhetoric to make every gun owner look like there's some subversive, when we're the ones actually trying to say, no, we want a stable society,
right,
not an unstable one, which has been what the left has provided with us for the last 2 years.
Yeah, so the truth matters. And this is the point that I'm trying to drive home to you. I mean...
You don't have to drive it home to me. I already agree with you.
The truth matters. And right now, unfortunately, it seems like our political system, I used to think, okay, that you had two sides of the political system and they were both trying to get to the same place just in two different ways. And I think we're starting to see evidence that now we kind of just want two different things. People are not being convinced anymore. People are either being woken up or they're not being woken up. And I think that the best chance that we have to keep the Second Amendment as the safeguard to our Constitution is the truth. And if you tell the truth enough and you cut out the lies enough, people are going to start waking up and they're going to start understanding that this safeguard is necessary for our Constitution.
Yeah, I think for any of our rights, Second Amendment, obviously, you and I, we work on this every day here at work in our own personal lives, has to be protected and defended against people. But I also think people have to, and I'll use the old school word, wake up and smell the coffee, as it were, and realize that politicians are not kings and queens. Part of the very fabric of what it means to be an American is we're anti-royalty. We do not, Meghan and Harry coming here is an absolute joke to me. It's like, you guys are just the biggest ignoramuses ever, because if you think the American people are going to be like, oh, we have royalty, do you not remember your own family history? We booted you out. We don't like royalty, and we're probably going to boot them out, but that's a different video. What I want to talk about right now is the idea that we, the people, are the boss. The politicians work for us. If we don't like what we're getting, fire them.
Yeah, and we're actually seeing a lot of that right now in school boards with the whole, and this is a national thing, not having to do with firearms, but parents are certainly waking up because of some of the curriculum that these school boards are handing down. We can, I mean, as an organization, been trying to rally people to local government meetings, like fair boards trying to shut down gun shows, like city councils trying to impose unconstitutional ordinances. I mean, the same thing calling into these Senate subcommittee hearings. But at the same time, we have, when you're faced with death, certain things become important to you. And actually, a lot of people, we've talked about this before, woke up during the pandemic. What did they buy? They went out and they bought out all the hand sanitizer, they bought out all the toilet paper, and they bought out all the guns.
Right.
So, I think it's kind of interesting that we are still hearing these sorts of things when the American population, which, by the way, okay, of all the new gun owners throughout the country, we've seen over 1 million in California, but national totals, you're talking about 50% African-American purchasers, 30% female purchasers. This is not, this is not sequestered into a specific category of person in the United States. This is everybody who's going out and realizing that firearms are becoming an essential part of their life, and it has nothing to do with harming others. It has to do with protecting themselves.
Kevin, I think everything that we've been talking about is important because it comes back not just from the national and Uncle Joe, but it comes to Gavin Newsom here in California. I mean, the most restrictive, arguably, shutdowns in the nation happened in our state. this is a guy who hyper focused, and I'm just going to call him out on it, on law-abiding gun owners when he has a system that has, and we can talk about this at another time, tens of thousands of people that are felons with guns. His government doesn't go after that, but he certainly sparks the Democrat-controlled Assembly and Senate to bring more onerous gun laws against us, and we're not even in the top 20, reasons for death in California, but we're definitely the number one that's gone after in legislation. And what has been Californians' response across the thing this week was, 1.7 million people signed up for the recall. It takes 1.5. And Newsom was so arrogant, and this arrogance that we're seeing in government is what just appalling. He's like, just wait, because they have I think it was a little over 30 days where people can go online and say, pull my signature off of that. And because I've done so much for them, they're going to do it. I think it was 38 people did that.
Yeah.
So 38 people said, he's a better, Governor, you fell short, 200,000 people doing that. And now we're recalling him. And part of the recall is, when you're coining the numbers, I think it was well over half of the people that bought those firearms in California were women. You were right on people of color. It wasn't a white thing that the national media wants to make it out. And, I heard more people who are center left look at me and go, I finally figured out during the past few months, there's not that much law enforcement on the streets. Good neighborhood, bad neighborhood, doesn't make a difference, and can't carry a cop in my pocket. So I need personal protection. It's got to be something I do.
Well, yeah, and this is what I'm talking about. I mean, these people are now coming to CRPA. They are learning our mission statements where they were directed and diverted elsewhere prior. And I don't think we should always necessarily count on threat of death to wake people up to firearms in this state, but it can be done.
Do you think it's really a threat of death? Because I used to think that too, but over the last few months, I'm wondering if it wasn't. We all talk about this at work, and you and I've talked about this when we've been traveling. Our life is sped up so much with, internet, cell phones, etc. We're, as the founder of Tesla often says, we're like cyborgs almost, with the computers connected to us 24/7. But I think during COVID, we all had to slow down just a bit, being locked down. I think people got more reflective and started to read more stuff. They didn't just take the soundbite from the media, and they started to question.
Well, yeah, when you have a little bit more time, those things are possible, but the world speeds up again, which is why I'm trying to make, the point that I'm making here is that we just need to start talking. If
Exactly.
if you are somebody who would consider yourself a closeted firearms owner, it's time to step out of that closet and it's time to start preaching. We have rested on our laurels in this country for a very long time, and a lot of people have put in a lot of work to start trying to take that away from us, and we are starting to see the repercussions. Our founding fathers, they fought, they were threatened with death for what they were doing. If they were successful, so they didn't die, but if they weren't, they would have. And
I think every law-abiding American believes that each of us has a right to our own culture, our own family, equality across the board. But I want to point out something. While I support that and have worked my entire life for people's civil rights and will continue to the day I leave the planet, that's everyone's civil rights. It's not one group over another. It's everyone's, and it's got to be based in honesty. And I agree with some of the groups out there that are pushing we need an honest narrative. Yes, and we need to make sure everybody's honest narrative is heard.
Yeah, and you hear so many stories about how an individual doesn't even realize how many people that they affect, whether it's an action or a conversation or whatever.
Correct.
So speaking to one person might wake them up or change their mind or whatever you want to tag it with, but then the next 4 conversations that person have, this can take off really quick. We just need to start speaking out a little bit more.
And I think we need to start showcasing stuff. As well as Kevin and I do, that firearms ownership does not belong to old white guys that are my age or older. It doesn't. I know when I go hunting, I see many, many, many more people a whole lot younger than me. If anything, I'm the minority in the hunting field these days, of color, which I find absolutely wonderful and fantastic, and want to encourage that growth. I see the same thing when you go and watch 3 gun competitions. Those are largely people of color, men, women. A lot of them a whole lot younger than me, because I'm not going to move as fast as my age as somebody in their 20s is going to. And so when I hear the narrative out there of, oh, well, the Second Amendment is just a bunch of old white guys that are rednecks that live in the backwoods, that's such a falsehood that, I think we could finish on killing that one here before we end the video, but
well,
that's
yeah,
just
I mean,
crock.
you like your parks, you like your speech, you like your fresh meat. There are so many consequences, from positive consequences, that come from the firearms community at large, and alongside that is actually a lot of good, long-lasting relationships in positivity, safety, and training. So, yeah, I mean, definitely, we just need to start spreading this, this word.
Yeah, I think one of the most iconic things to finish the video with is, and even though we're doing this in the middle of the summer, is Thanksgiving. A few months from now, when that happens, families come together. We all eat till we have food comas. But you got to remember something. Those food comas, the original ones, came from because Native American people of color worked with European people, and they went hunting. We don't know from the historical record if some of that wasn't jointly done. And they provided food to a large table where everybody came together as one and ate together. And I think we need to realize that that American tradition of people from all backgrounds coming together for a meal was supported by people who had firearms and archery equipment to do so.